So, hello and welcome to ESTRO 25. We are here with Vision RT and we have an amazing guest on. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Perfect. Hi, my name is Wesley. So thanks to Joe and Naman. I'm based here at Vision RT on the clinical application team. And I think we're just going to chat through a little about getting into the industry and what Vision RT does.
So, what's your role here?
So I'm currently Director of Clinical Applications for the EMEA region.
Okay. And how did you get into that?
So I started as a therapeutic radiographer back in South Africa, and I moved over to the UK for my first role as clinical applications at Electa. So that was my first move over to the dark side or commercial in a way, but still with a very clinical focus. And so primarily customer training, implementation of paperless workflows and stuff in new clinics. And then I moved over to Vision RT in 2017. So it's just over 8 years now. And again, starting in a clinical application role, sort of leading the team and then moving still very clinical focus. But yeah, overseeing most stuff within the team and sort of customer facing as well.
What do you miss most about being clinical?
I think the direct patient interaction, because I think for us that's a really big focus. I think that's why we all get into the field. That's what we enjoy the most. Um, The strange thing, though, is that we're still very much in touch with what happens in the clinical environment. We're just working with a team on the other side that then deal with the patients. So it's not directly interacting with the patients, but I feel like we're still having an impact in that patient journey, and we're still sort of influencing their clinical outcomes and sort of inputting into that process. So yeah, I do miss parts of the clinic, but I still feel like I haven't completely lost touch of that element.
I suppose here then at ESTRO, what type of people come to the stand?
Yeah, so I think because it's probably one of the major conferences for therapists, oncologists, physicists across Europe, sometimes even further afield. So people coming over to the booth are obviously interested in new technology, having a look at sort of what are the current trends. Is there anything that's sort of being done that they're not really doing? Some people are investigating new technology. So I think there's quite a wide variety. There's obviously existing customers as well that sort of come around to see what's new. People that are sort of exploring options with improving their techniques or just, yeah, essentially inquiring what SGRT is all about.
So, for anyone out there who has no idea about surface guided
Yeah.
radiotherapy, what is it and why should they come and talk to you here on the
Perfect.
stand?
So I think surface guided radiotherapy, I think a lot of people are a lot more familiar about the concept now than it was 8 years ago when I started, because it's so different from what we know in radiotherapy. So everything is sort of radiation, and now we're looking at surface guidance, which is optical or video based technology. And I think it's sort of revolutionizing a way in which we've done things, because with traditional radiotherapy, we've relied on skin markings and we've relied on X-ray imaging. Whereas with SGRT, we're using this video base, which is non-ionizing. It's very patient friendly because it's non-contact. And so it's allowing us to use this technology to accurately position patients and in a very non-traditional way, because we've got the entire surface. It's reconstructed live. It allows us to nicely position our patient in all 6 degrees of freedom. So we get their posture correction, we look at the isocenter positioning, and then also during the treatment delivery, it just adds another dimension of the intrafraction motion. So again, it doesn't use any radiation, but it's live feedback and it's updating so many times per second that we're really getting almost near real-time information. And it's adding a safety component by being interfaced with the LINAC to stop the beam if the patient's not in position. It allows us to do techniques like deep inspiration breath hold for left breast. It's improving the accuracy for high precision treatments like SPRT, hypofractionation techniques. And I think slightly beyond that application of patient setup and intrafraction motion, we're adding in other elements into that patient journey, into the planning process, into the simulation process, into dose visualization. So I think you see that SGRT is expanding beyond that initial indication of patient positioning and patient tracking.
I think it's a nice mix for us therapists, therapeutic radiographers, because you've got the clinical aspects, the lots
Yeah.
of details,
Yeah.
and then the patient contact.
Exactly.
I think all three of us know that patients don't like tattoos.
No.
It's a reminder, obviously, on different skin types doesn't show up very
Mhm.
well, but patients then might struggle to look at their body properly afterwards.
Exactly.
I think the future, obviously, with different treatment sites, there's the open face mask for head and
Yeah.
neck, there's things like that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think so, like you mentioned, there's that psychosocial element of it. And if we can avoid the tattoos, but provide the patient a more comfortable experience, but again, still while maintaining the accuracy, I think that would be our core focus. And like you mentioned, tattooless and also pioneering things like open face masks and then maskless radiotherapy. And if you think about it, you didn't really think it was possible, or you didn't really know that things could go in that direction, because these are such critical, high precision treatments, and you want to ensure that how do we maintain that accuracy? How do we mobilize them enough, but still make that patient experience pleasant? And I think we able to merge that two nicely together by incorporating accuracy and patient comfort into the same sort of equation.
I think it's been really interesting to see how Align RT has actually highlighted maybe some issues in radiotherapy that we
Yeah.
hadn't necessarily realized
Yeah.
before, like splashing onto the opposing breast.
Yeah.
I think using some of the dosimetric things that you were talking about,
Absolutely.
it really does
Yeah.
literally shine a light
Yeah.
on some of those
Yeah.
issues. Is there anything that you've been surprised by in
Mhm.
how the SGRT has kind of highlighted maybe clinical problems that we didn't
Yeah.
know existed?
Yeah. I think, like you mentioned, we're seeing a lot more than we used to. I think it's giving us an additional sort of dimensional perspective, like you say, that hasn't really been seen before. So, one factor that you mentioned is being able to see that dose splash or that dose delivery in real time. So, Dose RT, which is sort of really innovative offering from Vision RT, is using these high sensitivity cameras to look at that dose fluence in real time during treatment delivery, and where's the entry and exit doses, is are we delivering what we intend to? And I think we always create these amazing plans, but what happens in reality? And so, like you say, we able to see what we haven't really previously, and from our early adopters we are seeing that there's around 8 to 10% of errors that we haven't really noticed before. Like you said, splash over sort of overlapping dose or stray radiation into areas that we don't intend. So slight changes in patient position can actually influence where that dose is deposited. So if we look at dose into the contralateral breast, we know long term that's going to create issues. There's sort of we don't want sort of new cancers or recurrence of cancers, and I think there's a percentage of a risk associated with that. And then the other thing you look at is, are we getting exodose into an area that we don't intend? We also didn't really know that. Well, we tried to, or we think that patients don't necessarily move during treatment, and we're noticing that they do. And so we're able to detect this, we're able to account for that. So overall, it's really showing us a lot more that we haven't seen previously. And of course, the more we know, the more we react on, and we can make things better, essentially.
So let's fast forward a year. We're still not sure where we're going ESTRO
Yeah.
2026, but
Yeah.
what should we expect to see from Vision RT and you, perhaps?
So I think Vision RT, being the inventors of SGRT, is we're continually pioneering within the space of SGRT. You've seen that we've expanded beyond the treatment element. Within the planning component, we're looking at um, how do we make non-co-planar treatments more readily accessible? How can clinics deliver this with a high level of confidence? How do we improve the clinical outcomes by having the surface information and understanding how can we extend treatment arcs? How can we use different gantry and couch positions to improve the plan conformity, to improve the clinical outcome? There's innovative solutions like we mentioned, dose RT. So how do we move in a direction where we can quantify the dose? Is there an element of in vivo dosimetry where we can actually look at what was the plan and intended dose and correlate that information? There's solutions for sort of bore-based Linux or adaptive radiotherapy. How do we incorporate into that element? So as things tend to evolve and progress, how do we keep abreast with that technology as well and provide that additional element from SGRT?
You just reminded me something. Do you remember diodes, and you do
Gosh.
bilateral breast,
Yeah.
just all
Yeah.
the diodes.
Yeah.
That's all it reminded me about the in vivo dosimetry. I was like, oh, that used to be so challenging. And for the patient, they were like, why are you hooking me
I
up to
know.
the wall?
And I think because I was back in the clinic probably 12 years ago, and with even an older Linac, and it was 6 or 15, and you'd have to remember to stick them on. And on the second day, you're like, oh, we have to really remember those diodes, or you'd be under the table trying to stick it through a posterior field.
You see it fall off. You're like,
No, exactly. And you're like, repeat diodes tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I think everyone can relate to that. And definitely in vivo dosimetry is the direction that we're going in. And like we said, we just want to ensure that what we're planning is what we're delivering. And there's definitely way better ways than doing it with sticky diodes.
There's a talk, a debate talk later on at ESTRO today about the role of immobilization and is it needed with the development of things like SGRT.
Yeah.
What's your view on immobilization? Is it the end of immobilization devices, and is it more about comfort for patients, or is it actually still part of radiotherapy techniques to have some element of immobilization for patients?
Yeah, I think, like you said, sort of a controversial topic.
Yeah, we love a bit of controversy on Rad Chat.
And I stay on the party line.
Yeah, exactly. So probably politically correct. No, I'm kidding. I think the core or the fundamental concepts within radiotherapy is how do you get a reproducible position,
Yeah.
and how do we immobilize our patients well.
Yeah.
And so I think, like we said, with all of these things, what's the trade-off? So we still want to ensure that the patient is a reproducible position. We still want to ensure that they maintain that position. So I feel like we do need immobilization for sure, but how do we make that sort of less invasive, less restrictive?
Yeah.
So we still want to maintain that element where the patient is still enough,
Yeah.
that they're maintaining a comfortable position, because then they're probably more compliant. And then, of course, with the SGRT element, if patients were to move during treatment delivery, are we detecting that and are we responding to that quick enough?
Yeah.
So I think we've done a presentation yesterday and one today as well with the macromedics posterior shell, and we've seen there where we've removed the anterior component of the closed mask.
Yeah.
And from the early data from these patients across the two sites that are using the technology, we think by removing the immobilization that patients are going to move and just do as they please.
Yeah.
And it's actually not the case.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that patients are more comfortable, they're more compliant. And beam interruptions, I think from one of the sites in Thor, they analyzed 20 fractions.
Right.
And within 3 of those fractions, patients move momentarily.
Right.
And from the other data as well, we've seen that patients are maintaining a good head position, and they're able to sustain that for the duration of the treatment. We're using less invasive fixation devices, and patients are more comfortable, they're more compliant. So
Yeah.
I think we need the immobilization, but how do we make it as comfortable as possible and still achieve what we want to? So I think there's that balance again.
Yeah.
Immobilized, but with a patient comfort element.
I think we're also much more aware now of
Mhm.
the impacts that our treatment has on
Yeah.
our patients.
Yeah.
So, the role of therapeutic radiographers in
Mhm.
psychologically supporting
Yeah.
their patients.
Yeah.
Late effects clinics are seeing patients with PTSD as a
Yeah.
consequence of having
Yeah.
closed
Yeah.
masks.
Yeah.
So this could revolutionize not only necessarily accuracy and reproducibility, but also patient experience, and ultimately reducing maybe some of the health delays of things like mental health, PTSD, anxiety, depression.
100%. And I think one of the customers yesterday, so Josh, one of the physicists, really highlighted that apart from all of the numbers, apart from all of the data, what's behind all of this is the patient. And I think the patients prefer it.
Physicist.
Exactly. And so it's actually
Sorry,
nice.
Josh, if you're watching this.
I think it's actually nice to hear because, like you say, they're sort of in the background. We're more patient facing. We're more aware of the struggles. And I think, irrespective of everything else, for the patients, it's quite a traumatic journey. There's just so many elements of it. They just want to ensure that they're getting the correct treatment. There's a lot of the social or psychological aspect that goes around it, the stress element, the anxiety. Am I going to respond really well to treatment? So there's a lot going on. And like you say, I think we're more aware of that. We're better suited to support the patient, not just from a clinical perspective, but how are you doing? How are things going? And making it as pleasant as possible from what's a not so pleasant situation. And just going back to the component where Josh highlighted that behind all of this is the patients. They prefer it. That's what they want. And so we're still maintaining that accuracy element, but we're making the journey a lot more pleasant for them. Yeah.
I think the health economic stuff, just quickly, is really important for commissioners.
Yeah.
Because they don't necessarily always know about radiotherapy anyway.
No.
But when they can see the health economics benefits from something that's surface guided,
Yeah.
the long term benefit for patients and also other treatment sites is massive. But that's what we obviously want to keep pushing and showing.
Exactly. I think, and it's for us to probably drive the awareness around it, and I think you're doing a lot of that already just through your platform. And health economics, I think we look at the waiting list that you mentioned. How do we improve efficiency? How do we improve patient throughput? And so I think through having these additional technologies, especially SGRT, we see that patient setup is quicker. We're able to see a lot more patients. We're able to offer hypofractionation treatments to speed up those 30 fractions down to 5 or 15 down to 5, and we can still deliver that in a safe way. And so can we hypofractionate but still have a high level of confidence that we're doing it accurately? And then again, do we get more patients through the system? Can we treat more patients per day? Even in clinics, if it's 2 to 3 more patients per day, that's already making an impact. So I think it's for us to guide that or move that way forward, to create the awareness about it. There is technology that's enabling us to be able to overcome some of these challenges that we're seeing.
And at Rad Chat, we try to always be as impartial as we possibly can be. But one thing that I'm quite passionate about is the environmental impact of radiotherapy. And I think anything that you can do to limit things like utilizing masks 100%. When essentially they might end up in patients' homes if they choose to do something with them. But let's be honest, a lot of it probably goes in landfill. Or medical waste disposal, and that has to be something that we start to think about as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of the thermoplastic, it's a waste element, right? So we say to patients at the end of treatment, do you want to keep your mask? And some of them are like, they would take it and burn it or throw it away. Or we know in areas where there's just such a high prevalence of head and neck cancers, you get into the bunker and you see so many of these masks. In sort of lower socioeconomic countries, there is reusing of these thermoplastic masks where it is, again, the cost element. So how can we provide some option to the patient by reusing that mask sometimes 2 to 3 times? And then you say, okay, is there a sustainability element with it? And then do we really need it? And so I think as we get more data moving forward, say, can we just have the posterior shell? Can we have just a little strap versus an entire closed mask? So where we can save in that element from a cost perspective and from a waste perspective, I think that's the way we should be heading in.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us.
We can talk about hours.
I know. I'm definitely with me. There's lots to chat about always. But thank you. I really appreciate your time and also the opportunity. And again, whatever you guys are doing through the platform, it's really impactful.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks for joining us here at ESTRO 25, and check out all of our other short videos.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Joe. Thanks, Naman.